In the year 1850, deep in the heart of rural Georgia, the Whitlock estate sat like a crown of decay among the rolling fields of cotton and sorrow. The plantation house, with its white columns and sagging roof, stood as a monument to a family line that had once held prestige but had since fallen into whispered scandal. It was here that Margaret Whitlock, the widow of Colonel James Whitlock, lived out her days in a silence so heavy that even the cicadas dared not sing near her window. James had been a man of great ambition and greater cruelty. Known across 3 counties for his temper, he ruled his estate with a steady hand and a whip that cracked louder than thunder. The slaves feared him, his wife, it was said, feared him even more. Yet when he died, suddenly, one stormy night in the spring of 1850, Margaret's grief was absolute. The doctor claimed his heart had given out from the strain of drink and rage, but some whispered that the widow's calm afterward was too practiced, too composed. Others swore they saw her standing by his coffin that night, her face lit by candlelight, murmuring something low and tender as she traced her fingers across his cold cheek. After the burial, she withdrew entirely. The house grew quiet. The servants were dismissed one by one until only 2 remained, an elderly maid named Ruth and a mute stable boy who slept in the barn. Ruth said that the widow refused to eat, refused to leave the house, and spent long hours in the parlor, where her husband's portrait hung above the fireplace. But then, one evening in late May, she summoned the undertaker back to the estate. The man arrived uneasy, clutching his hat as she led him through the dim halls to the cellar. There, by the glow of a single lantern, rested the coffin of Colonel Whitlock. Margaret's voice was soft but firm as she gave her instructions. She wanted him exhumed, cleaned, and preserved. He was a great man, she said, her eyes shining like glass, and great men should never decay. The undertaker protested. It was unnatural, against the order of God, but her tone turned sharp, commanding. By the end of the night, the coffin was open. When Ruth entered the parlor the next morning, she found Margaret sitting in her morning gown beside the colonel's body, which lay stretched upon a wooden table. His skin was pale, waxy, and without blemish. The air stank of chemicals, of oil and metal polish. Margaret looked up at the maid with a faint smile and said, "I am having him painted, Ruth, gold, so that he may shine as he did in life." Ruth fell to her knees in horror, but the widow only stroked her husband's hair and began humming softly, a lullaby she had not sung since before the war. The next days passed in dreadful ritual. Margaret hired an artist from Savannah, a quiet man named Abel Crane, to carry out the task. He arrived trembling, yet the money she offered could not be refused. For 3 days he worked in silence, coating the colonel's body in gold leaf, layer upon layer, until the dead man shimmered like an idol. Margaret watched from a chair near the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Occasionally she would rise to correct the artist, pointing to a spot along the jaw or hand where the gold did not gleam evenly. When the work was done, she dismissed Abel without a word, and from that day forward the parlor became a tomb. She placed the gilded body upright in a high-backed chair before the fireplace, dressed once more in his uniform. The effect was grotesque and mesmerizing, the golden figure catching the light of every candle, its eyes dark pits beneath the sheen. Margaret began hosting suppers again, though the guests were only the dead. She laid a table for 2 each evening, speaking softly across the parlor as though to a living husband. Ruth, terrified, would watch from the doorway as her mistress poured wine into 2 glasses, lifted one to her lips, and waited for the other to empty itself. Soon, the estate workers began to report strange things. At night, the parlor windows glowed faintly, though no fire burned. Footsteps echoed in the halls, heavy and measured. The stable boy claimed he saw the colonel walking along the veranda, his face reflecting moonlight like a mirror. No one believed him until one morning Ruth found gold flakes scattered across the floor near the door, as though something had brushed against it from within. Margaret's mind unraveled slowly, gracefully. She began to dress in her wedding gown each morning, her hair pinned in the same style she had worn on the day they married. She took to speaking aloud in 2 voices, hers and one that mimicked the colonel's. When Ruth begged her to stop, she replied coldly, "He hears me now. He loves me now as he never did before." The maid fled the house soon after, leaving the widow entirely alone with her creation. By autumn, no one dared come near the estate. The crops in the surrounding fields had withered, the air reeked of sulphur and rot. Travelers spoke of seeing a flicker of gold through the windows, and of hearing laughter echoing from the parlor long after midnight. The sheriff sent a deputy to investigate, but the man returned pale and silent. He resigned the next morning, refusing to speak of what he had seen. Then came the night of November 2nd. A storm swept through the valley, lightning cracking over the hills. The Whitlock house was struck once, twice, until its roof caught flame. Neighbors saw the blaze from miles away, but were too frightened to approach. They said they heard a woman's voice rising above the thunder, singing the same slow hymn Margaret had hummed by her husband's coffin. By dawn, the house was nothing but char and ash. When the fire died, the townsfolk finally gathered the courage to search the ruins. They found no trace of Margaret Whitlock, no bones, no remains, but amid the rubble of the parlor stood something untouched by fire. It was a golden figure, seated perfectly upright, its hands resting on its knees. The gold had darkened with soot but did not melt. The head was tilted slightly downward, as if gazing at something unseen. The sheriff ordered the statue removed, but the men who tried found it impossibly heavy, as though it were rooted in the earth. They covered it with a tarp and left it there. Weeks later, a traveler passing through found the tarp torn open. The statue was gone. In its place lay two handprints in ash, one small, one large, pressed deep into the floor. Years passed. The land was sold, rebuilt, forgotten. But on some nights, when the moonlight spills across the valley, the people of Whitlock County say they see a faint golden glimmer in the fields, moving slowly between the trees. And if you stand quietly enough, you might hear the sound of two voices, one woman, one man, laughing softly, as though from a distant parlor where the fire still burns and the gold still shines. As the summer of 1850 deepened into a humid, heavy stillness, the golden figure in the Whitlock parlor became something between a relic and a curse. Neighbors whispered that the widow, Lillian Whitlock, was seen speaking softly to the shimmering corpse long after the candles had burned down to wax puddles. Some claimed to have heard music drifting through the windows, piano keys struck in trembling, uneven chords, followed by a woman's voice humming a hymn that hadn't been sung since her husband's burial. In the daylight, the gold shimmered with unsettling warmth. Visitors who dared enter the house, mostly merchants and curious neighbors, said the painted skin seemed to glow even when the shutters were drawn. The widow had insisted that her husband, Thomas Whitlock, be covered in pure gold leaf, paying a traveling artist from Savannah to finish the job in secret. The artist vanished a week later, leaving only his brush and a torn ledger page behind. Rumor spread that Lillian had sealed him inside the house for days, forcing him to complete his work as the air filled with the smell of turpentine and decay. Every morning, Lillian would descend the stairs in a black silk gown and sit across from the gilded figure. She kept the room spotless, dusting the curtains and polishing the table where her husband sat eternally upright in his mahogany chair. When visitors asked why she displayed him so, she would answer with a trembling smile, "He was the light of my life. Should I not let him shine still?" At night, she lit candles around the parlor and prayed aloud. Her servants, what few remained, could hear her pacing and whispering as though in conversation. One maid swore she heard a man's voice respond, low and muffled, beneath the widow's pleading tone. Within weeks, no servants remained. The house fell silent save for Lillian's lonely rituals. By autumn, the air within the Whitlock home had changed. Visitors spoke of a sweet, metallic odor that clung to their clothes. The gold on Thomas's skin had begun to crack, revealing strange black seams beneath. Lillian refused to acknowledge it. When the pastor of Milledgeville came to counsel her, he found her seated beside her husband, her fingers tracing the flaking edges of his jaw as she recited psalms about eternal glory. The pastor left, shaken, and warned the townsfolk to keep away. Then, one October night, a storm swept through Baldwin County. The lightning struck close, shaking the windows of the old Whitlock home. Neighbors claimed they saw the house glowing faintly through the sheets of rain. The next morning, Lillian appeared in the town square, barefoot, drenched and trembling. She said nothing, only clutching a strip of gold leaf to her chest like a holy relic. When the sheriff accompanied her back home, they found the parlor doors sealed from the inside. The hinges were warm to the touch as though fire had licked them. Inside, the room was choked with the scent of burned resin. The gilded corpse sat exactly as before, but its face had changed. Beneath the melted gold, the features seemed softer, the eyes half open, the mouth curved faintly into something that might have been a smile. Lillian whispered, "He spoke to me last night. He told me to let him breathe." The sheriff, horrified, ordered the body to be removed. But when two men tried to lift it, the gold flaked away in sheets, revealing flesh that was neither alive nor properly dead. The men swore they felt the chest rise once, just once, as if drawing air after a long, suffocating silence. They fled the house and refused to return. From that night onward, no one saw Lillian Whitlock by day. The curtains stayed drawn, and the air around the estate grew foul. The few who passed by at dusk swore they saw her silhouette through the parlor window, standing close to the chair, her hands pressed to something gleaming faintly in the dark. The piano would play sometimes, slow, broken hymns, and in between the notes a low hum, deep and rhythmic, like the sound of a heartbeat echoing through hollow gold. By December, rumors became legend. Children dared each other to touch the front gate of the Whitlock home, believing they would hear whispers through the metal. The local priest claimed he saw a golden shimmer on the frost one morning, and took it as a warning from God. When he returned to the house with a Bible and a bottle of holy water, he found the door unlocked and the air unbearably warm. The parlor was empty, the chair was overturned. On the floor, a trail of gold flakes led toward the staircase, up into the shadows of the second floor. The priest called out, but received no answer. Yet as he turned to leave, a faint sound rose from above, two voices singing softly in unison. That night, the Whitlock estate caught fire. It burned until dawn. When the flames finally died, the parlor walls were blackened, the piano reduced to ash, but the chair remained intact, its surface streaked with melted gold. In the ruins, they found no bodies, only a pair of footprints leading out the back door, one bare, one dusted faintly in gold. To this day, the townsfolk say that on summer nights, when the moonlight catches the river just right, you can see the reflection of a woman walking beside a man made of light, her laughter drifting faintly through the pines like the whisper of burning leaves. The ashes of the Whitlock estate cooled under the grey Georgia dawn, but the story of what had burned there refused to die. Within days, scavengers from the nearby towns came to pick through the ruins, hoping for silver, copper, or gold. Most fled within minutes. They spoke of hearing a faint melody, a broken lullaby drifting through the charred timbers. A few swore the smoke that rose from the ruins shimmered faintly, as if flecked with gold dust that glittered even in the absence of sunlight. Lillian and Thomas Whitlock had vanished without trace. The town sheriff organized a search party that scoured the nearby woods and the riverbanks, but no sign of them was found. Only a single footprint impressed into the river mud, a woman's, bare, slender, half flooded by the tide. The other print, smaller and darker, glimmered faintly under the torchlight, leaving men uneasy and silent. In the weeks that followed, strange tales spread through Baldwin County. Travelers on the Savannah Road claimed to see a woman walking at dusk, her gown shimmering as if threaded with gold. She was always barefoot, her face veiled, and beside her walked a man whose body shone faintly in the dark. They never spoke, but some who crossed their path claimed to hear a sound, soft, rhythmic, like the slow beating of a heart encased in metal. The local church tried to bury the matter, declaring it blasphemy to believe in the return of the dead. But one night, the pastor's wife saw candlelight flickering in the ruins of the Whitlock parlor. Her husband went to investigate, armed with scripture and fear. He never returned. At dawn, his Bible was found on the road to the river, its pages fused together by something golden and sticky. By the turn of the year, the land around the old estate had grown hostile. The grass refused to sprout where the ashes had fallen, and the trees nearest the ruins began to blister with a golden resin that hardened like lacquer. The locals called it the widow's curse. They said the air itself was tainted by her devotion, that any who lingered too long in the shadow of her love would hear whispers in the stillness, promising reunion, no matter the cost. A new family tried to build on the land in 1851. Within months, their youngest daughter, Clara, fell ill with fever. She spoke in her delirium of a beautiful woman in a black gown who came to her window each night, asking if she wished to shine forever. The mother found the child one morning sitting upright, hands clasped over a lump of something metallic. It was a coin-shaped flake of gold leaf, warm to the touch, though the fire had long gone cold. The family fled, abandoning their crops and leaving the house unfinished. Nature reclaimed the ruins, vines winding through what was once the parlor, the soil littered with bits of melted gold that never dulled. Yet the place never truly emptied. Hunters lost their way there, hearing the soft hum of a piano somewhere deep among the pines. Those who followed the sound found nothing but silence, until they turned to leave and caught sight of two shapes standing side by side in the tree line, their faces indistinguishable, their outline trembling like heat on stone. In 1853, an itinerant preacher came through the county. He claimed to have been visited in a dream by a woman of gold who begged him to sanctify her resting place. Against the warnings of the locals, he ventured into the woods at dusk, carrying only a crucifix and a lantern. The next morning, the lantern was found beside the river, still burning faintly beneath the water. The preacher was never seen again. Years passed. The story faded into folklore, though no one dared approach the Whitlock grounds after sunset. The gold-streaked soil remained untouched, the trees humming faintly when the wind blew just right. It was said that lovers who kissed beneath the ruined chimneys could hear faint laughter, tender and haunting, echoing from the parlor that no longer stood. Then, in 1872, long after the tale had become a ghost story told to frighten children, a surveyor from Atlanta came to map the old Whitlock lands. He was a practical man, fond of reason and science, who scoffed at superstition. He found nothing in the ruins but dust and twisted metal, yet that night, while camped near the river, he awoke to the soft glow of gold reflecting off the water. Two figures stood at the opposite bank, the woman and the man, her hand resting on his chest, his arm draped gently around her shoulders. They did not move or speak, only shimmered faintly in the mist. The surveyor fled at dawn, abandoning his equipment. When his journal was later found, a final entry was scrawled in trembling ink: "They are not gone." The gold was never for beauty. It was to keep him here. Even now, the people of Milledgeville say the river bends strangely where it passes the old Whitlock land. On some nights when the fog rolls thick and the air grows heavy, the water glows faintly, as though reflecting something beneath its surface. Those brave enough to look say they see her, Lillian Whitlock, kneeling beside her husband, her hands clasped around his gleaming face, whispering her devotion into eternity. And in the hush that follows, when the night holds its breath, the faint sound of a piano rises again, each note shining like a drop of molten gold, echoing through time, a love that refused to tarnish even in death.